Welcome to the Kendo and Iaido Italia podcast in this English language version. Enjoy listening.
Welcome to a new episode of Kendo and Iaido Italy. I hope you enjoy the topic we'll be covering. Today, we are launching a deep dive into two Japanese martial arts that, well, they both use the katana, but they often get mixed up. Kendo and Iaido. You say sword martial art, and most people, they immediately picture Kendo. The armor, the shouting, the bamboo swords clashing.
Yeah, and that's totally understandable visually. But our sources really show that while they share some history, they are, as one source put it, completely different. Mm-hmm. So our mission here really is to synthesize the history, the philosophy, and, the practical stuff. So you can grasp why they got confused, but also why one became this huge global sport and the other stayed, well, something else entirely. We're basically tracing how the sword went from, a battlefield tool to a tool for mental training.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this. Because to really get the split, we need to go back, way back, like 400 years or so to the foundations. Before Kendo or Iaido, as we know them, there was this general term, Kenjutsu.
Kenjutsu, yeah. That was the art of the battlefield, how to fight once the sword's already out, often wearing full armor, think tactical combat. Sustained fighting, not just a quick draw.
Exactly. But then, around the early 1600s, Japan enters the Edo period. 265 years of relative peace. Big battles, mostly over. And when life gets peaceful, the art of killing has to, adapt, doesn't it?
It really does, and that peaceful shift is basically where Iaido comes from, or Ijutsu, as it was first known. It's often credited to a master named Hayashizaki, and his big idea, the real innovation, wasn't about the drawn fight. It was separating out and perfecting the technique of drawing the sword from the scabbard, the saya, and cutting, immediately, in one motion.
That timing gap, that seems crucial. If you're a samurai just walking around Edo, you're not expecting a battlefield charge. You need to be ready for, an emergency situation in daily life, as the sources say. A sudden attack. Maybe in a tight space. So the focus shifts completely. It's all about that instant draw and counter. Iaido, or Iujutsu, was perfect for that kind of peaceful but still potentially dangerous society.
Right. Now, Kendo comes from that same peaceful Edo time. But the reason is kind of the opposite in a way. If you're a samurai, you still need discipline, you need training, but you can't just practice full-on kenjutsu with live blades all the time. Too many people would get killed or injured. So the goal shifted. It wasn't primarily about killing others anymore. It became about training a strong heart and mind.
That's interesting. So if it's not about lethal technique anymore, how do you actually practice? How do you keep sharp without, the constant danger?
That's the problem Naganuma Zaimo tackled. He's credited with developing, or at least popularizing, a specific training method, using protective armor, the bogu, and that split bamboo sword, the shinai. Ah, the shinai.
Exactly. That combination, the shinai and the armor, let samurai practice sparring, full contact, testing skills safely. They called it geikink. And this highlights, I think, the absolute core difference you need to get. Iaido stayed focused on the actual sword technique, the draw itself. Kendo, though, started as a safe method for training. A way to spar and build character when using real swords for practice wasn't practical.
Okay, that makes sense. So one is the technique itself, the other is the way you train the technique, or train with the technique. The sources had a great analogy for this. It was like, imagine if soccer was suddenly banned. You couldn't play the real game, so instead everyone starts competing in ball juggling contests.
Right.
Kendo is kind of the juggling. It's the safe, structured method that lets you keep the skills and the philosophy going, while Iaido is still trying to perfect the actual kick, just maybe without the full game context. That's a really good way to put it. Kendo became the infrastructure for mass training because it was safe. And that difference, bamboo versus steel, became absolutely critical when things got tough later on, in the late 19th, mid-20th centuries.
Oh yeah, the crises. Both arts faced huge problems, starting with the Meiji Restoration.
Huge problems. The samurai class was abolished. Then the Meiji government, passed the Sword Abolition Decree in 1876, basically banned most people from carrying katanas. Police, military, but not regular citizens.
And then after World War II, it got even worse. The Allied occupation GHQ, they confiscated pretty much all privately owned Japanese swords, which meant any art needing a real blade was suddenly in deep trouble.
Deep trouble is right. Iaido, needing that katana, was pushed almost to extinction. Its survival really depended on these small, dedicated groups just passing down their specific styles. It wasn't until 1954, quite a while later, that they managed to form the All-Japan Iaido Federation, really as an effort to preserve the art.
But Kendo had an edge, didn't it? Because it used the shinai.
Exactly. The bamboo sword was its saving grace. It made it, as one source said, a culture easier to inherit and spread. And crucially, it got picked up and integrated by the police.
Ah, right. That police connection is key.
Absolutely. The police needed practical methods, especially dealing with some of the unrest and rebellions, like with the Satsuma Rebellion and the Batatai Swordsmen. Kendo offered a way to train swordsmanship skills and maintain discipline in a standardized, safe, and even competitive format. That kept it alive, institutionalized it, really.
And it got its official name, Kendo, in 1920. So it had this structure, this official backing that Iaido lacked for a long time.
Precisely. And as they both survived and adapted, they also went through this philosophical shift. You see it right in the names. From jutsu to do.
Kenjutsu to Kendo, Aijutsu to Iaido.
Yeah. And that change tells a story. Jutsu just means techniques or skills. It's practical. It's what you use when swords were, frankly, tools for killing. But when that everyday necessity disappeared with the peace and then the sword bans, the purpose had to change.
So changing to do, which means path or way, it signaled something different.
Exactly. It signaled that the practice wasn't primarily about combat anymore. It was about self-development, a way to train your mind, your body, your spirit, a path of life, often tying into Zen principles, discipline, focus, calmness under pressure. That philosophical shift made them relevant, meaningful in a modernizing Japan.
So one path do uses the specific technique of the draw to cultivate mental readiness, Iaido. And the other path uses controlled combat, the sparring, to cultivate that same readiness, Kendo.
You got it. Two different paths to a similar goal of self-improvement, born from the same roots but diverging significantly.
Okay, so that gives us the historical context, the why. But let's get practical. If someone listening walks into a dojo today wanting to learn, what are the big visible differences? Let's start with gear. That seems pretty obvious.
Oh yeah, the gear tells an immediate story. Iaido. Remarkably simple, actually. You need the standard training clothes, the hakama, the G-jacket, a belt, and, well, a sword. That's basically it for equipment.
But the sword itself, that's where it gets specific, right? Because most people aren't using razor-sharp katanas.
No, definitely not, unless you're very, very high rank. Most practitioners use what's called an I2. It's a blunt sword, usually made of an alloy, not steel, but it's specifically designed and balanced for practice for all the drawing and swinging in the kata. They need to be strong enough not to break during training, which is crucial for safety.
Okay, so specialized sword, but otherwise simple gear. Now, Kendo.
Kendo is the opposite end of the spectrum. Gear heavy, you need the shinai, the bamboo sword, obviously, and then the full set of armor, the bogu, that's 4 main pieces. The helmet, the men, the gloves or gauntlets, the kote, the chest protector, the door, and the hip and groin guard, the tear.
Right, the full suit. And speaking of the bogu, the sources mentioned something pretty funny, actually, about the smell.
Yes. Apparently the worst part of Kendo, especially in summer, is the armor, because it's made of all these layers, cotton, leather, lacquer. You can't just toss it in the washing machine, so it gets pungent, which tells you something about the physical intensity, right? You sweat a lot in Kendo.
Definitely suggests a different kind of workout. So that leads right into the second big difference. The actual techniques and focus. This seems like the biggest divergence.
It really is. This is where they become almost different activities entirely. Iaido training is overwhelmingly solo. It's done through kaita. These are prearranged sequences of movements, imagining different scenarios, drawing, cutting, finishing against invisible opponents. Very precise.
Like karate kata, but with a sword.
Exactly like that. The focus is on perfection of form, posture, breathing, mental state. It's often described as like a form of moving meditation, actually practicing against another person. It's super rare in most Iaido schools. The source suggested maybe less than 5 times a year for some people.
Wow, okay. So competitions must be judged on the kata quality then.
Yep. Accuracy, power, presence, spirit, timing, all judged within the solo form.
Now Kendo. Completely different animal.
Totally different. Kendo is 100% about fighting another person, albeit in a highly structured game format. It's a full contact sport. Think fencing, but with Japanese swordsmanship principles. You score points by striking specific targets on the opponent's armor, head, wrist, body, throat.
And you have to do it with proper technique and spirit, right?
Yeah.
Including the shout, the kiai.
Absolutely. A valid strike needs good form, follow through, and that strong kiai to show intent and awareness. It's loud, it's fast, it's dynamic.
So solo meditation versus full contact sport, that really clarifies things. And I guess that explains the third main difference, the sheer number of people doing each one.
Without a doubt, the training population difference is huge. Kendo is massive, maybe around 1.8 million practitioners globally, the sources estimate. Iaido, much, much smaller. Probably around 100,000 worldwide. It's far more niche.
And Kendo's popularity, again, it seems tied to that safe training infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. Because you use bamboo and armor, it's safe enough for schools. Kendo clubs are really common in Japanese schools. Lots of parents encourage it for discipline and physical fitness, knowing the risks are managed. And like we said, the police connection keeps it strong too, with dedicated competitions.
Whereas Iaido, well, bringing any kind of sword into a school is usually a non-starter.
Exactly. The sword requirement, even the blunt Iaido, is a major barrier for young people or school programs. So the people who do Iaido tend to be older, maybe drawn specifically because they're, big fans of katanas, as one source put it. Or perhaps they're people who actively dislike vigorous exercises and prefer the quiet intensity and mental focus of the sola kata.
That makes a lot of sense. Different paths attract different people. If we circle back for a second, thinking about the meaning of Iai.
Right, to be in that moment.
Yeah, that idea reflects the original purpose, doesn't it? Reacting instantly, perfectly, in an unexpected emergency. There's a very different mindset from preparing for a scheduled kendo match in an arena.
A completely different mental space. And that focus on the technique, the tool itself, brings us back to the sword and something really important. Safety. Especially for anyone curious about katanas.
Good point. We mentioned the Aikido, the proper, blunt, alloy training sword. Strong enough for practice, relatively safe if used correctly. And you said the cheapest reliable ones are maybe $200 upwards?
Around that, yeah. You can spend a lot more, but that's a starting point for something actually made for practice swings.
Okay, so this raises a crucial question. What about those really cheap katanas you see sometimes, like souvenir shop cheap?
Ah, yes. Those are likely what's called a mizoto, a model sword. Basically a decoration.
Not for swinging.
Absolutely not for swinging. The sources are incredibly clear on this, and it's critical. Never, ever try to swing a cheap Mizoto. They're not built for it. The blade tank, the part inside the handle, is often weak, maybe just glued in or held by flimsy pins. It's not meant to take the force of a swing.
And if it fails?
If it fails, the blade can literally fly out of the handle. It becomes a projectile. People have been seriously injured, even killed. It's incredibly dangerous.
Okay, that is a vital warning. So if it seems too cheap to be true for a practice sword, it probably is. Assume it's display only unless it's explicitly sold as an A2 rated for practice.
Please, yes, safety first. The tool dictates the practice, and in Iaido, even the practice tool demands respect and caution. So just to quickly wrap up the main takeaways for you listening, Kendo, think popular, contact sport, bamboo swords, armor, sparring focus, big in schools, police forces. Iaido, think specialized, solo art, real sword or I2, focus on the draw and kata. Mental discipline, smaller, dedicated community.
And maybe the most fascinating thing is that underlying transformation we talked about. How these skills, originally honed for life and death moments, didn't just disappear. They evolved into these complex paths, these badasu, for developing the self, mentally and spiritually. It kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What skills or practices do we value today that maybe evolved from something much rougher, much more dangerous in the past? And how fragile are they really?
Thank you for joining us for this episode, too. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Kendo Iaido Italia, il podcast.